Welcome to Valemount Votes. This is a series of one-on-one interviews with the candidates for the Prince George Valemount electoral district, and it's presented by Valemount Community TV and the Valemount and Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm Michael Peters. A recent Angus Reid poll found that just 2 in 5 voters can say with absolute certainty which party they will support this year. So it is very important for all the parties to let voters know where they stand on important issues. Each of the 4 declared candidates in the Prince George Valemount district was invited to participate in these interviews. Unfortunately, 2 candidates did not respond, so we'll have 2 candidates responding. The same questions will be posed to all of the participating candidates. And we're here today with Shirley Bond, who is the candidate for the BC Liberal Party. Shirley, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Let's start by getting to know you a little bit for those who don't know you. Could you briefly tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course, and thank you very much for the invitation to have this conversation today. It is important. I am a lifelong Northerner. I absolutely love where we live. I'm very, very passionate about this part of British Columbia. I'm probably, when I think about what I'm most proud of and what shapes who I am the most, it's the fact that I am a mother and I'm also a grandmother. I have 2 grandsons, Caleb and Cooper, who give me a lot to think about and really motivate the work that I do. I'm also incredibly blessed to have been married for more than 40 years to a wonderful man, Bill, and his recent passing has certainly provided me with some challenging personal situations, but I'm very thankful for the incredible relationship we had. I think people recognize that I have a strong work ethic. I care about where we live. I've been very, very honored to represent the riding of Prince George first, Mount Robson, and then Prince George Valemount. And people who know me well know that I work very early to very late and all of the hours in between. So, I'm passionate about what I do, and I'm very grateful to have had this opportunity to serve the people of this incredible part of British Columbia.
Great. Well, thank you very much. So now's the time when we're going to give each of the candidates up to 2 minutes to make an opening statement. So, Shirley, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Well, I want to first of all begin by thanking the Chamber of Commerce and in particular Holly Blanchette and obviously you, Michael, at Valemount Community TV for giving us an opportunity to speak to our constituents. These are very unusual times in British Columbia, and while I would have loved to have been there with you in person, we know that we have to reach out differently. I think that I also want to recognize the candidates who have put their names forward. I know that it takes a lot of courage to put your name on a ballot. And, that shows courage and passion, and I want to recognize them. But today in British Columbia, we're facing the impacts of a global pandemic. We have a declared provincial emergency, and we have obviously economic uncertainty. And one of the things that I've learned is that, those circumstances make things even more challenging in rural and small communities across the province. So it's felt provincially, but even more strenuously in communities like Valemount, McBride, Dunster, Dome Creek, all of our Robson Valley region. So we have exactly the same needs as people who live in large urban centers for infrastructure, services, making sure our small businesses survive and that we support families. But we have a smaller tax base, a smaller population. And so, it is harder to get the attention that we deserve in regions like ours. So it is essential that all levels of government work together. And I continue to support the Team Valemount approach, where we bring people to the table to work together for a common purpose. So lots of work to do. I certainly bring experience and a proven track record to the table, and I think that's what we need as we look at managing our way through a pandemic and beyond. We need to restore confidence and rebuild British Columbia.
Great. Thank you very much. That was perfect. Let's move on now to the topic areas and questions. And so for the viewers, we have topic areas set aside here and questions that viewers have asked. There'll be 5 different topics: COVID-19 pandemic management, economic recovery, healthcare, climate change and the environment, and housing affordability. So we'll move on to our first topic, Shirley, if you don't mind, and that is COVID-19 pandemic management. BC has been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic with now over 10,185 cases and 245 deaths in the province. In the Northern Health region, we've had more than 330 cases and 3 deaths. And this is, of course, not to mention the huge socioeconomic toll that the pandemic has taken. So we have 2 questions on the COVID-19 pandemic management. We're going to talk about economic recovery matters in the next topic area. So if you could please limit your answers to non-economic matters here. The first question is, what is your party's plan moving forward for dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic? How will your party help keep British Columbia safe until a vaccine can be developed and delivered?
Well, first of all, very difficult times in British Columbia and around the world when we think about those who have lost loved ones and faced the impacts of COVID-19. And I think we need to begin by recognizing the great work that's been done by Dr. Bonnie Henry. I think it's safe to say that it doesn't matter what party you belong to in the British Columbia legislature, we've seen exceptional leadership on her behalf. I think it's also important to know that Bonnie Henry is an independent officer, and in essence, she provides advice to ministers, to the government, to public health officials. And so as a group in the legislature, we supported the work that Bonnie Henry was leading. And I want to assure my constituents that that is exactly what will continue to happen. It isn't up to politicians to be analyzing the public health steps that need to be taken. That is the responsibility of the public health officer. So we would continue to work constructively with Dr. Bonnie Henry, listen to the advice that she's provided. Interesting fact, we actually hired Bonnie Henry when we were in government, so she spans 2 governments with her advice. I should also say that we are going to create a pandemic response committee, and we would do that very quickly if we were fortunate enough to be elected. It would bring together members from all parties in the House to work together collaboratively to work our way through the pandemic. So Dr. Henry would continue to provide advice. We would have a pandemic response committee that would work closely with Dr. Henry. And something that I think is essential from my perspective is we will also launch an independent review of the response to COVID-19 in our seniors' homes and long-term care homes. As we know, that has been a devastating outcome of the COVID-19 pandemic. We need to get to the bottom of what we need to do to improve those circumstances. I should also just point out that our leader is a medical doctor, and I think that will be an advantage. So bottom line, Michael, is we would continue to take the advice of an independent public health officer, provincial health officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, and create a pandemic response committee to continue the excellent work that Dr. Henry has done.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question on COVID-19 pandemic management is, do you believe that the wearing of masks in all public spaces should be made mandatory in BC as it is in many jurisdictions in Canada? Why or why not?
Well, again, I think we need to look at, and first of all, we need to recognize that there are a lot of views and a lot of opinions about the use of masks. I personally wear a mask when it is expected of me, when that is in, a business or a place that requires them. I wear a mask because that's the appropriate thing to do. And again, I don't think it's up to me as a politician to determine where and when and how masks should be worn. I believe that we should follow the prudent advice of medical health professionals. And in our case, that's Dr. Henry. And what she said was that you need to wear a mask at the right time, in the right place, and using the right mask. She agrees that there is a right place for masks. And basically, if you can't maintain a safe distance, masks can be a benefit. So I think, Michael, we need to pay attention to what Dr. Henry and other health advisors tell us to do, and we need to follow that advice. Make sure that if you're in indoor, small spaces and with people you don't know, you should consider wearing a mask.
Okay, great, thank you. I neglected to mention to the viewers that we've allotted 6 minutes for each topic area. However, the economic recovery area has a number of questions, so you only used 4 minutes in that first topic, so we're going to give you 8 minutes to respond now to the economic development, economic recovery question. The global COVID-19 pandemic has also ravaged BC's economy. The Business Council of BC is forecasting that BC's economy will shrink by 7.5% in 2020 and then grow by 4.5% in 2021. If that's true, it will be a long time before we return to a pre-pandemic economy. So here are the questions. There's actually 5 questions for you, so if you could try to power through them all, we'd like to get all our viewer questions in here.
All right.
But you do have 8 minutes. So, first question, what are your party's plans to bolster BC's economic recovery as we work through the pandemic?
Well, I think that, we have a number of crises in our province at the moment. Certainly the pandemic is one of them. The opioid crisis is another one. But economically, we are facing extremely challenging times. So we know this, and I've heard it from small businesses right throughout Prince George Valemount. They need immediate help. So our initial plan, and we intend to create an economic response plan. In my view, it is long overdue. I think the current government has paid attention to the healthcare side in a way that is very complementary, but I think we need to pay attention to the economy. We are going to be facing deficits in British Columbia and other jurisdictions for the foreseeable future. But we have announced that we will eliminate the provincial sales tax for a year and then reduce it to 3% in the subsequent year. It's a chance for us to put money back in the pockets of businesses and families. It is immediate relief that they've been calling for, and so have business organizations across the province. So it is a response to things that we've heard from businesses and from experts in the field. We're going to build in British Columbia. We're going to have the largest infrastructure program in BC history, adding an additional $8 billion to look at hospitals and roads and all of the things and services we need. We're going to create a fair tax commission. So important. British Columbia has lost its competitive advantage. We need to get back to that place, rebuilding confidence in our province. So we will have a nonpartisan fair tax commission that will review every tax and look at whether they need to be adjusted or removed. And we're also going to look at major project certainty. All of those things are about creating jobs, restoring confidence, and making sure we have an aggressive plan to address the economic challenges that we're facing today.
Great. Well, thank you for getting all that in that one short question. That's great. Our second question is, how will we see support from the provincial government with regards to staffing shortages? Do they plan on appealing the foreign work program, or will they lobby for more federal support and grants to attract workers?
Well, we know that in our region of British Columbia that staffing has always been a challenge. I know that I've been there, and when I've talked to whether it's hoteliers or people in the restaurant or service industry, it's a real challenge to get the workers we need. And COVID has actually enhanced that problem, because significant grant programs have allowed people to choose to stay at home rather than be in the workforce. So our first priority should always be looking at local hiring and how do we focus on that. So, in relation to whether we need foreign workers or not, my view has always been you start locally, then you look regionally, provincially, and beyond. And there is at times a need for foreign workers in British Columbia, but it should only be when they are required and with specific needs. So we are going to look at targeted, specific programs to attract workers, to train workers. And I can tell you this, that we need all levels of government at the table to make sure we're looking at training, recruitment, retention, and making sure that we use foreign workers only when there's a defined need. And certainly that has been the case in British Columbia. But our platform commits to dealing with labor shortages and looking at innovative and aggressive plans to support especially small communities as they deal with those labor shortages.
Great, thank you. Our next question is on small business. With regards to small business, the federal government has many robust programs in place. However, how will the provincial government work to support small business startups?
Well, I can tell you this, small businesses are the heart of the economy in British Columbia. About 98% of businesses are named and are small businesses. And so they have been devastated, many of them facing the impacts of COVID. So we have some very specific steps that will take place immediately. The elimination of the PST for the first year, as I mentioned, reduction to 3% in the second year. We're also going to eliminate the small business tax. That tax has been a disincentive for many small business owners. So we're going to get rid of the small business tax. Something I've heard about a lot is the cost of PPE and making sure that businesses now adapt to the new COVID world. So we're going to take WorkSafe BC surpluses and actually return them to small business owners to deal with the issue of the added costs of PPE. Again, how do we reduce those costs immediately? One of the things I'm going to continue to do is work on adequate internet and cell phone coverage. You can't market your business globally if you don't have the ability to have the bandwidth that we need. So we need to continue to look at internet services. We need to specifically recognize the importance of small businesses in British Columbia. We intend to increase capital and investment for new startups. We know how hard it is for new startups to access funding for capital and find the investment they need. So we're going to look at a specific program to help support new startups. But let me say this, the need for help now is immediate. And that's why we're looking at reduction of the PST and eliminating the small business tax.
Okay, great. Let's move on to tourism. Tourism is a major part of Valemount's local economy. Often when restart plans are drafted, and specifically in regards to this pandemic, they neglect small communities. What are your party's plans to support tourism in a small community such as Valemount, and where does this priority lay in your list of priorities?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you that when you think about diversifying the economy and looking at the Robson Valley region, tourism is right. It should be right near the top of the list of priorities. And I've certainly seen that in my time of service. You know, the theme, let mountains move you, we need to capitalize on the incredible geography that we have. So again, these businesses, tourism, hospitality, they have been decimated during COVID. And so we're going to look at an aggressive plan to develop and grow regional tourism hubs. And that's really important to me. We need to look at the short-term supports that I've already mentioned several times, the immediate relief through the PST and small business tax. But we also need to find ways to help small businesses and tourism businesses tell their story. And that's why I loved the Tourism Valemount business features. And I looked at some of those and I heard from B&B operators, for example, that having that tool, putting their story out on YouTube and elsewhere is absolutely essential to growth of the tourism sector. So we're looking at how do we provide dollars and support to tell that story. Marketing will be an important part of the post-COVID recovery strategy for tourism. So very important. I see it as a priority, whether it's bike parks or the brewery or the bakeries, or whether it's you look at the hotels, the restaurants. We have an amazing story to tell, and we need to make sure we're providing resources for those businesses. So congratulations for the work that's been done by Valemount Tourism Valemount. They do an exceptionally good job. We need to build on that.
Great, thank you. So our last question in this is with regards to taxes, and specifically business taxes. Business taxes are creeping up year over year. What plans, if any, does your party have to either roll back mill rates or business taxes to allow small business to slowly recover?
Well, you can't tax your way out of economic challenges. And, you know, I've certainly been clear on the record for the years that I've served that, you know, we have to look at the tax burden on businesses. We have to look around us. British Columbia has become an island of uncompetitiveness when you think about it. If you look to the east, we have Alberta that's looking at tax reductions. If you look to the south, we know that that's a priority for the government there as well. We need to be competitive. And the way that we do that is look at a competitive tax regime. So you've seen us take a start already. You know, the elimination of the PST, the elimination for a year, the elimination of the small business tax, and the Fair Tax Commission. They will review all of the taxes And you think about it, since the NDP were government, they had 23 new or increased taxes. And that's not helping us when it comes to competitiveness. So we're going to look at how we get back to being competitive, how we restore confidence and rebuild British Columbia, and reviewing our taxation policies and practices is an important piece.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Well, we're going to switch topics now, so if you want to have a little drink, this is a good time to do that and relax a little bit. Thank you. Thank you.
Right,
I know it's difficult in this format, in a timed format, to get the answers in, so I appreciate your promptness on that. Topic number 3 is on healthcare. According to a November 2019 Times Colonist article, BC spends less on healthcare per capita than any province or territory in Canada. We also have the lowest number of hospital beds per capita in the country, leading to long wait times for surgeries. Many hospitals, as you know, are busting at the seams. As British Columbians age, providing quality healthcare without long wait times will become increasingly difficult. We have 2 questions on the topic of healthcare in BC. First one being, what is your party's plan for dealing with, and it's a multi-part question, reducing surgical wait times, providing more appropriate and cost-effective care in homes and communities, and lastly, addressing human health resources challenges?
Mm-hmm. Well, healthcare and the provision of healthcare in Northern British Columbia has been a significant priority for me. I worked tirelessly to make sure that we have cancer care closer to home, looked at how we train physicians in the north for the first time in BC history. We continue to look at ways to enhance how we care for people in Northern British Columbia. So we do have to address the issue of wait times and wait lists. And one of the ways we do that is by increasing capacity. And so we've announced a significant and record-setting infrastructure plan that would look at adding capacity. For example, at University Hospital of Northern BC, we would look at cardiac care, making sure we have appropriate surgical care, and looking at expanding those services from a regional perspective. We also need to continue the good work that's been done, and I do admit that it's good work when we look at primary healthcare networks and community health centers. So we need to continue to invest. We need to build capacity. That's the way we can ensure that those wait times come down. We also need to manage wait lists differently. And so we're going to look at tools to help us manage those wait lists. We're going to look at public reporting and how we manage manage that information. But the key is adding capacity, and whether that's physical infrastructure or adding healthcare professionals, finding ways to keep people at home wherever possible. We're adding things, for example, like a tax credit for seniors who can look at receiving care at home, and they would be able to garner up to $7,000 in tax credits. So it's looking across the entire healthcare spectrum, adding capacity, training healthcare professionals. UHNBC needs more specialists, and so does Northern British Columbia. We need to train people closer to home, and that's going to be something that I continue to focus on. And we have a specific commitment to work to attract healthcare professionals to underserved areas, and that includes small and rural communities, like we see in the Robson Valley. So I just want to, first of all, thank the people in the healthcare system who work tirelessly to ensure that we have the best care possible. Valemount's a perfect example of that as they serve the Robson Valley region. There's more work to be done, and we're committed. And certainly as an MLA, it's been a priority. And I'm going to continue to fight aggressively for training professionals closer to home, adding capacity at our hospitals, and making sure our rural and smaller communities have as much care as we can possibly find a way to deliver.
Great, thank you very much. Second question on healthcare in BC is, and I touched on this briefly, the opioid epidemic has experienced an exponential rise during the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly here in the north. What do you feel are the gaps between mental health supports, community-based stigma, and self-medication?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this is one of the significant tragedies that we are facing, not just in British Columbia, but across the country. The opioid crisis isn't a matter of urban versus rural. It's a problem everywhere, and we need to grapple with this issue. So, first of all, we need to increase the number of addiction treatment and recovery programs. And we need to look at a broad spectrum. It's time we ended the penalties, for example, and the disincentives for abstinence-based programs. We need to get rid of that. We need to make sure that, there is programs for whether it's harm reduction or abstinence-based. We need a broad spectrum of care. And I think what we need is a pathway to recovery. We need to look at a seamless removing those gaps and a seamless series of programs and supports for people. We need more community-based resources, and we have to start earlier. One of the things that is so difficult to grapple with and deal with, but we need to deal with the issues of mental health and addictions and education much earlier. So we're going to look at how you provide more mental health supports in schools, and particularly in secondary schools. But I also want to concentrate on prevention. We need to look at a prescription drug monitoring program, and we're going to put one in place. And what that does is allow for earlier referrals, providing earlier treatment options, and actually monitoring people when they have prescriptions. So a whole series of issues to deal with what is a big and significant issue right across the north.
Okay, great. You have, I think, another minute, so we'll add it into the next topic area for you, if that's all right. And our fourth topic today is going to be on climate change and the environment. The science is undeniable. Our climate is changing dramatically and quickly. Some say we're on the brink. Others say that we're already over that edge and that countries in the world need to act now, and they need to act decisively. So we have two questions for you on climate change and the environment. First one being, what is your party's platform on climate change and the environment? And does that platform contain concrete actions that can be implemented immediately upon taking office?
Well, I think, first of all of us recognize that when we grapple with the issues that we're facing, we talk a lot about the economy. But from my perspective, it's not about the economy or the environment. It's about both. We need to deal with how we restore British Columbia to being a global climate leader. And I'm a firm believer that we do need more clean, green options. And whether it's in transportation or the built environment, we need to look at how we do things differently. So we're going to look, for example, at programs that would support retrofitting homes and businesses. And when you think about that, that has a dual function. That will create jobs, it reduces cost, and it also allows for people to look at those issues that are related to their homes or businesses. We're also going to look at adding more electric vehicle charging stations, and Valemount is a perfect example, having already moved in that direction. We're going to support investments in renewable energy. And, one of the things that I'm very proud of is that I have worked across party lines, for example, to look at the issue of geothermal in the Robson, in Valemount, to support the projects there. I worked with Andrew Weaver, with Sonia Firstenow, to look at how we could make geothermal reliable and a project that moves ahead. We all know that we have to move, and we will, over time, move away from the use of oil, and we will look at electricity, for example. And British Columbia is blessed with a supply of clean and green energy. So we're looking at how do we unleash projects that deal with solar and wind, and in our case, geothermal. I have always been a strong supporter of things like run-of-the-river projects, and while other parties may not have seen that as an advantage, I have, because I know it creates jobs in small rural communities. So one of the things that also matters is what happens in bureaucracies. We're going to ensure that every ministry takes into consideration environmental impacts and environmental improvements with the decisions that they make. So obviously a priority for us, it's not about the economy or the environment, it's about both. And so we need to look at aggressive strategic plans that look at clean energy options and looking at how we can unleash the power of the green energy that we're blessed with in British Columbia.
Okay, thank you. Our second question, if we agree that we must wean ourselves off of reliance on fossil fuels as part of a strategy for moving towards a cleaner planet, what specific actions does your party propose to train and retrain workers towards a greener economy?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to recognize that we have unbelievable expertise in British Columbia. We have world-leading technologies in our province, and an example of that would be technologies that deal with carbon capture. So we're already looking at how do we support that innovation. We talked earlier about, how do we provide dollars for startups and for technology companies, and the kinds of a green economy in British Columbia. So we need to prepare ourselves for increased reliance on electricity instead of oil, and that's exactly what we're looking at. So we are going to look at how we train workers for a global knowledge economy, for a greener economy. But I also want to point out that we have to look at ways to recognize that we have a resource sector in British Columbia that has been the backbone of our economy. We need to make sure that we look at a complementary approach. I am a strong supporter of developing responsible, sustainable, environmentally responsible major projects in British Columbia. So again, workers there, we need to make sure we're focusing on finding the right balance, looking at not simply the economy, but also the environment and how we do that in an environmentally responsible way.
Great. Well, you have 2 minutes left, so we're going to give you 8 minutes at the last topic, which is another important one, and this is on housing affordability. Like much of BC, Valemount is experiencing a shortage of available housing, especially affordable housing, which is affecting home buyers and renters, families and seniors. The question on this topic is, what are your party's plans to help make housing more available and affordable for home buyers and renters in BC and, of course, Valemount?
Well, it's a really important question, and I hope that people will take the time to go and review our recently released platform, and they will see that a significant part of it relates to housing affordability and supporting renters in British Columbia. And one of the things that I've always believed very passionately, that everyone deserves a place to call home. And whether that's a rental unit or an affordable housing unit or, a stick-built home or whatever it looks like, we need to find ways to support and provide those kinds of options. I have to start with a congratulations to the small, hardworking group of people that made the recent opening or the beginning of the construction of affordable housing units in Valemount a reality. It just goes to show you that when there is a team of people that work together, we can make those things happen, even in small communities. So we're going to look at a very aggressive housing strategy, and it starts with supply. You have to increase supply. So we're going to look at an incentive fund for municipalities that can demonstrate that they have policies in place that would increase the supply of either market or rental housing. We're going to look at tax and permitting changes that will increase supply. We need to look at those structural pieces that inhibit municipalities like the Village and others from making increases in market supply. We're going to look at property tax structures. We know that can be a significant disincentive. And how do we work with municipalities to look at property taxes that will incent affordable housing units and rental? We're also going to look at reviewing regularly official community plans, or OCPs as we know them. And I know that Valemount is currently going through that process, and I came in and did a walkthrough of the community with the people that are working on the OCP. We have to look at zoning issues, incredibly important when we think about how you move projects forward. And I think that what I've seen across the province is that it isn't necessarily that there isn't a desire to increase options, including rental and affordable and market. Often it's the availability of land and the tax and the permitting issues. So we need to get to the bottom of that. and add supply. So the other thing we're going to do is look at creating energy efficiency rebates for rental renovations. And think about that. It will create jobs and it will incent people to think about how you renovate to make things possible for rental units. We're going to use provincial and potentially municipal land for affordable housing. We have to figure out how we partner to make that happen. One of the things I've heard about consistently is delays in building permits. We have to make sure we are streamlining that process and moving that forward. And something that's really personally important to me is we're going to look at how we increase the supply of fully accessible units. There are far too few of them in British Columbia, and we need to make sure that we're looking at building codes, that we're looking at what the expectations are for providing those accessible units. If you think about it, that's important from the perspective of an aging population. All of us are going to need those kinds of accessible places to call home. So from my perspective, a very high priority. And you know, the thing I think, the message that I want to leave is that I think often people assume that affordability, looking at availability, that those are issues that just matter in urban British Columbia. We know that is not true. When I think about the initiatives underway, both in Valemount and McBride and throughout the Robson Valley region, it is about housing, looking at how we provide more options. How do we allow seniors to stay closer to home and providing the kinds of affordable housing? Affordability is an issue, whether it's McBride, Valemount, or whether it's Vancouver or Whistler. So I want to really work hard to make sure that options are provided closer to home for people who want to stay in the Robson Valley region. And again, we've seen some success. We know there's other projects that we're working on in Valemount and McBride, and I need to make sure that you have an MLA that's going to aggressively push those projects forward to completion.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So that is the end of our questions. Thank you for your economy of time. You actually have 2 minutes, and I'm going to break protocol here and allow you to talk up to 2 minutes on any, or you can take it on one topic that we've covered or on all 5 of them, but you've got an extra 2 minutes if you would like to use it.
Okay. Well, I think what I want to emphasize is that we absolutely have to manage through a healthcare crisis in British Columbia. And I think that most of us would agree that it's been done as well as it possibly could have been. And I think that's a credit to Dr. Henry and to the government of the day paying attention to that healthcare issue. But what we need to do now is make sure that we're going to deal with the other crisis, and that is the economic crisis that we're going to face. I'm the first person to admit that we are going to be in deficit territory for quite some time. But I think what we need to be looking at potential governments and MLAs to do is to outline what their economic response strategy is going to be. It is not enough to assume that taxpayers can afford to close and deal with this deficit by increasing taxes. We need to be competitive. We need to look at an economic response strategy that looks at post-COVID. What do we need to do to restore confidence in our province, to rebuild British Columbia, to make sure that we have investors that want to invest within the province and bring in investment from outside the province? So what I hope people will do, as we think about going to the polls, while the health crisis needs to be managed, we need to be thinking about how do we position ourselves to deal with the economic crisis that's facing British Columbians. And I think we have a pretty aggressive strategy to begin to look at that.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you keeping to time. You now have up to 2 minutes. We're going to allow 2 minutes to make a closing statement. You can use all of it or part of it, and please begin whenever you're ready.
Well, I want to begin with a heartfelt thank you to the organizers, to both Holly and Michael today and others who provided questions. And I also want to thank the people of Prince George Valemount who have for many years put their faith in me to take their views and their concerns to Victoria, to speak up on their behalf. You have no idea what an honor that has been for me. I think that one of the important lessons I've learned is that this is not a one-size-fits-all province or a one-size-fits-all riding. We need to look at our individual communities and villages, the places in Prince George, Valemount that need attention and support and services. And I have come to deeply appreciate the people of Prince George, Valemount, the innovation, their resilience. When asked about my riding by the Vancouver Sun, I spoke about the people and the resilience and the hard work and the innovation and the tenacity of the people that I represent. So I just want to close with this, that I commit to the people of Prince George, Valemount, that I will work tirelessly on their behalf. I think that I have demonstrated that I am accessible, that I'm willing to listen, that I'm willing to serve all of the constituents, whether they vote for me or not. What matters most is how do we get our story to Victoria? So I want to say thank you. I want to encourage people to get out and vote. It's so essential. I know that people are worried about an election during a pandemic, but I'm counting on you to get out to the polls, to have your voice heard, and I hope that I can count on your continued support as you go to the polls on October 24th.
Well, great. Thank you very much, Shirley Bond. And for you folks out there, please make sure to get out and vote. Advance voting for Prince George Valemount MLA will be held from Thursday, October the 15th to Wednesday, October the 21st from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at the Golden Years Lodge here in Valemount. And general voting day, as Shirley just mentioned, is Saturday, October the 24th from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and that will be held at the Valemount Community Hall at 101 Gore Street. Thank you, Shirley Bond, for being with us, and best of luck.
It was my pleasure, and thank you very much for the opportunity. I deeply appreciate it.
Great. And thank you very much for watching.